Please, Steve, go ahead with the agenda.
All right, very good. Thank you all for attending. This is our 6th meeting for Ecma TC54. Is there anyone new that has not joined these calls before?
I haven't joined before.
All right, Ale,
Welcome.
you want to, yeah, welcome.
Thank
You
you.
want to quickly introduce yourself and your affiliation and what you plan to get out of it?
I'm a troublemaker. I'm Olle Johansson. I'm based in Sollentuna, Sweden. I'm a consultant, an old open source participant, working a lot currently with the Cyber Resilience Act and how it affects product development. And that's why I got involved in OWASP and CycloneDX. I'm now a member of the industry working group. And I have a lot of interest in the Exchange API, especially the coming topic here.
Well, very good, Ale. Welcome. Anyone else? I think everybody else has been here before.
The Exchange API, did you say like the vulnerability exchange one?
The Transparency
Yeah.
Exchange API.
Transparency Exchange API, Koala.
Ah, okay. Interesting. Great.
So with that, I'll go ahead and do some quick CycloneDX updates, and then before we dive into the promo reviews, Daniel, if you want to put your modified agenda items in there, that's fine. Real quick for CycloneDX, the current state is that we are nearing feature completion. We have a few minor defects and a few minor documentation things that we need to do. Nothing that would actually be presented here. It's quite literally just a bunch of cleanup work. We do have one outstanding thing that Matt Rutowski, IBM, will be presenting here. That will be the final new feature that will be going into CycloneDX. And that would be eventually, approved by the core working group and us as well. But that's kind of the state of the spec. It's it's really, at the most part, it's mostly feature complete. We're just working on the quality aspects of the spec at this time. We expect to have OWASP release this probably at the end of March. If we're late, it'll probably be the 1st of April. Hopefully not on April 1st, but yeah, its release is imminent at this point. We've received a number of we have a lot of interest in a couple of different things. One is cryptography. I actually briefed the Singapore government on CBOM a couple of days ago. All of this support is being included in Cyclone. We as a group went over the cryptography support on a previous call. There's a lot of interest from different world governments, critical infrastructure, etc., on this capability. The one feature, however, that is really kind of lacking is, not from a spec perspective, just from an adoption perspective, is how do you exchange these things, right? How do you exchange artifacts on the supply chain, whether it's SBOMs or VEXs or attestations or any other kind of supply chain related thing? So we are going to be, I'm actually waiting for daylight savings time to kind of work itself out, because the United States, we do this in, I think it's like the 10th, I believe, March 10th. And then Europe, I believe, does it on March 31st. So once all the clocks kind of work themselves out, we're going to be standing up the feature working group for the Transparency Exchange API. And that work will continue in OWASP. And then, of course, once we get to some semblance of a spec, we want to obviously have the TC involved a lot in that discussion. I know from my employer, ServiceNow, I've talked to product management, and they are very interested in attending this. They have, not for their SBOM product itself, but in general, they have a large percentage of the Fortune 500s as customers. So they're very, very interested in how to facilitate the exchange of this kind of information in a secure and mostly automated kind of fashion. I know on the OWASP side as well, we have Dependency Track, which has 10,000 plus organizations using it, and they would be essentially the reference implementation for this API. So theoretically, we could have tens of thousands of organizations using this API to exchange supply chain information, and in the relative future. So I know Ole is kind of interested in that transparency exchange API. He's got some great ideas in terms of discovery. So we're trying to, as a goal, not focus so much on automation. Automation is kind of the low-hanging fruit. What we're trying to focus on is having use of the API be autonomous. And then everything else at that point, we should have the ability to scale tens of thousands of vendors in a single organization to be able to use this autonomously. Ole is actually writing a blog post that'll appear on OWASP.org as well. That blog post is nearly complete, and we'll be trying to, I'm going to try to do that pull request here soon. There's a couple brief mentions for Ecma as well as TC54, which is why I'm bringing it up to this group. And that's really all the updates I have for Cyclone. Ian?
I just want to pick on the phrasing autonomous. What do you, can you maybe expand on what you mean by autonomous? Is it like, yeah. What do you mean by autonomous in the API?
Yeah, so being able to discover, for example, hey, I've got ServiceNow, I'll pick on ourselves. ServiceNow as a vendor, for example, we should automatically be able to discover where the API, where the endpoint in ServiceNow is, so that as a customer, you should be able to then authenticate and get authorized to get SBOMs, VEXs, everything else that we're providing to you without human intervention. So you shouldn't have to specify a URL to get to our endpoint, for example. It should be discoverable. And that's kind of what we mean by autonomous. Daniel.
Are there further introductory materials that I could read about this offline? I mean, the Koala document kind of gets right into the specification, the Transparency Exchange API. I also was wondering if we should be establishing a TG for this, a task group, to focus on this in more detail, like we are doing with Pearl.
Yes. Well, I can't remember if we had, I thought we had a use case document for the Exchange API. My brain is a little fuzzy right now. Do you remember?
Sorry.
Do you remember if we had a use case document, more of a high level document for the Transparency Exchange API? I can't recall.
I can't recall it. It's something we need.
Yes, if we don't have that, we need that.
The repository is just straight on API operations, very little. But I mean, the main motivation here is I don't want to have a lot of manual people logging into web portals, downloading SBOMs and VEX files manually, and then manually uploading them somewhere else. All that manual labor just needs to disappear.
Or in some cases, proprietary APIs that people have to use, and everybody has a different proprietary API.
In my presentation I uploaded, I think I started adding a few use cases, including a
Okay.
bad actor, a hacker.
Oh, where did you
Let's start
upload that
working on that.
presentation to?
I think it was in the Bomb Exchange channel, but I can upload to the TC54 channel as well. Just hang on.
Oh,
But
yeah,
yes, we should
that'd be great.
establish a task group for this, Daniel. Absolutely.
So to establish a task group, we just need a program and statement of work, like a description of what the task group is
Yep.
trying to do, and then bring that to another TC54 meeting. We can adopt it,
Yep.
and then, but we can make like 1 or 2 ad hoc meetings before that. So whenever you feel like scheduling a conversation about this, I think it would be nice if that started with this discussion of use cases so that everyone can get up to speed, and then we could eventually like review the details and decide whether we want to standardize it or propose a standard to the Ecma GA.
All right, very good. You had some updates to the agenda that you wanted to make?
Yeah,
Daniel?
so in particular, I sort of a process / inclusion point. In some of the past meetings here, sometimes when we're talking about whether to adopt something, we say, okay, what do the ordinary members think or something? Or I've also heard from people say, oh, I don't know whether I'm allowed to speak because maybe I'm an observer or not an ordinary member. So I just want to clarify. The normal way of working here is we're all sort of co-equal. We're all just discussing things together. Everyone is encouraged to talk. If you're in the rare position of not having signed an intellectual property agreement with Ecma, then maybe do that soon. There are various different forms of this. Just be in contact with, especially Samina, or I'm also happy to help. That's the important requirement. Their membership is complicated, and we can work it out over time. But we're all here, and the point is for us to all be engaged in discussion together. When asking about whether people have concerns, let's just address that to the whole group. I think it's sometimes useful to call on individual people who maybe based on past conversations, they have concerns, but let's not emphasize too much like formal statuses in a way that might distort the conversation. So in particular, if you have a point to make, like the purpose of these discussions isn't for like one or other presenter to get their point across. I mean, that is a thing we're doing, but we're also trying to get everybody's input. So thanks.
Very good, Daniel. Samina?
Yes, just quickly. Thank you, Daniel. I just wanted to make note that I do have everybody's royalty free, with the exception of Ole, if I said your name correctly. So Ole, please do consider that. If you would like to be participating, it would be very important that we make sure that that's taking place. And you can reach me through email. If you drop me your email on the chat, I will make sure you have the right document. I just wanted to ask another question very quickly. We discussed TG1, which would be the PURL. For TG2, what is the name of the TG2 we were just talking about it and I missed it completely?
Yeah, it would be the Transparency Exchange API.
Thank you.
Samina, you got my email in the group chat here.
Thank you. Sorry. Thank you.
The next thing on the agenda for today is some work that IBM is doing around machine learning, specifically around environmental concerns, energy consumption for training and other aspects. So, Matt, did you want to walk us through this?
Yeah, please. I think I need permission to share.
Okay.
All right. Pardon my clutter. I'm working with one screen right now. So let me give you a brief background. So I've been working with AI stuff. Well, I was part of the work group that worked on the model card information, and learned a lot during that. And during the course of that, I also was been asked to work on AI, machine learning stuff in IBM. And actually now, as of January, I'm actually in IBM research, supposed to be working as close to 100% of my time on AI stuff. And I've been trying to, with the rapid cycle of AI and all the things that come out, it's very hard to get the attention of some of our top researchers. But one of the things that IBM is focused on is governance, model governance in all its aspects. And IBM also worked and announced early December that they're forming a new AI alliance, which is still getting its legs underneath them, but it includes Meta and Hugging Face and a lot of prominent names, a lot of prominent projects as well. And one thing I've known is that there are, and we all know there are ethical considerations for the data that goes into models, but more and more, and my research over the last couple of weeks has proved how important it is to recognize as AI proliferates and models become embedded and become part of every application that we use, down to appliances and things in our house, that there's an energy cost and other equivalent costs. There's environmental considerations. So I finally, last week, Tuesday, got the attention of, had to make sure I nailed down a couple of our researchers who are deep into this subject matter. And we spent several conversations, and I worked last Thursday on a napkin drawing of what type of data the industry would typically want to capture. So what you'll see here is a graphical depiction of a proposal that's in the referenced pull request and against 1.6 schema current. Since I developed this slide last Friday to try and show you what my thinking was and why I designed things the way I designed them. So effectively, even IBM, our IBM governance people, were tracking are currently only tracking training costs, the energy costs, energization, and CO2 equivalents. But a lot of the scholarly articles I was reading and blogs and whatnot and government articles were talking about, well, that's great, but then there's the models get created once, but there's also a cost at doing inference through them. So it seems like the state of the world's thinking about this is that there's two types of costs: the training costs, which is a big blob, and then inferencing, which is based upon some throughput, some energy throughput. So how many GPU seconds throughput does it take? And there's an equivalent energy to that. And then across the board, there is an explicit or inferred infrastructure costs for moving these models around. So my proposal today, strictly was trying to look at making sure we captured the training and inferencing costs, but also left room for future costs that I highlighted. Perhaps I also currently accounted for in green, that represents the different aspects of and different activities around developing a model, and then future things that no one potentially is tracking at that granularity. But I'm aware of the things in green. People are starting to track at certain levels, but there's been no formal recognition of that, or no consensus. Maybe the AI Alliance will take these things up, and I intend to present these things with our partners, the AI Alliance. I'll stop there and ask if there are any questions so far. Okay. So you saw perhaps that basically I want to propose a set of viral considerations. The only one now would be energy consumptions. And so I spent countless hours over the last 2 days up and through this morning debate, reviewing and reviewing and debating with my own self, a lot of the field names, key names, and definitions I came up with. So again, this is a draft proposal, so please go to it and take a look over and make some comments and suggestions. But if you look at energy consumption, typically the way the industry views them is that, and this is my concept of the activity, and that's why I created the previous slide last Friday, which there's different activities and these things that can grow, but these are the major activities that were both in yellow and green, where people might want to start tracking. So I'm trying to account for what's happening today, and we'll probably see over the next year. And then energy sources. So any activity may use a plurality of energy sources to supply the energy. And then think multiple data centers. That's why I put that in my comment there in cyan. But it's a distributed thing, and it's going to be more so. So I will say, I will go back. I'm going to go back to the slide previously for graphical things. So you see here, I have model evaluation, testing, and refinement in purple. There are some new technologies that I am being brought on board on very quickly. I'm going to spend all of my time learning, that is pushing a lot of the evaluation and refinement to before the training period, that'll be a little more along the data acquisition preparation. So there'll be data acquisition that will actually do a lot of the validation and refinement of the data before it actually gets put into the model. So those costs will increase dramatically if these technologies will be opened and made available to the general population through the AI Alliance. So again, new things are coming. Stay tuned. So basically you can think of anybody who has a set of desktops or whatever devices could individually be evaluating the impact on some data before it's added to the model. And the costs could actually grow to beyond the current costs, which are enormous for the final training. You can think of it as the PR builds. If you're a developer, you submit a PR and it does like mini builds. Those builds could cumulatively outweigh the final release training cost, energy costs. So a lot of thoughts behind there. And then the energy cost here is that for any activity, each energy source will provide their contribution to the total energy cost. And I'll show you the details of that data in a second. The final data, though, is summarized in a total energy cost. So that's what we're seeing a lot of providers give, is they give a sum total. So energy sources, that's a lot of detail that some providers may have, and we want to encourage people giving them what data centers are using, where are they located, and what type of sources. You'll see that explicitly in a second. But then a lot of people really cut to the chase and do CO2 equivalents, because that's kind of where the government focuses, the EPA and things like that, is what's the CO2 cost, because there are CO2 offsets. And I actually have if you look, I have provided some good links in the proposal in the comment section that show some of the examples on Hugging Face and other energy sources that cite these things. And then Hugging Face is very proud and promotes the CO2 cost offset. So they basically are paying for CO2 offsets for their model releases. So these are the three key metric areas that are being published with model cards today. I'll stop there and ask if there are any questions so far. I know this is a lot to take in.
I actually do. Sorry, I didn't
Yeah,
put
go
my
ahead.
hand up. I actually do have a question, and it may be a naive one, and I haven't checked the pull request, so sorry for that. But are there no existing standards for capturing this kind of information in a structured way? Yeah, that's basically the overarching question. And like the things that you have here, like equivalent cost, energy sources, energy provider, and so on, you came up with those yourself, right? Or was there some other standard you looked at?
There are these standards are evolving. And I cite some of the references that I know of in the pull request.
Okay.
So even the units for tons of carbon emission,
Yeah.
the unit shorthand is not even standardized. Some government agencies use TCO2 or
Yeah.
TC52EQ. And I've referenced papers that say they're used interchangeably. But this is the same, we're leading edge. The whole model card data set when we developed it, if I go back, was a survey that I did and others did of many different sources, each cloud provider's sources, and we did an abstraction, an amalgamation, an abstraction of data we saw from the leading providers. That was the normal development process. And I see this methodology I've used is the same.
Okay. I'm just asking out of more curiosity. In the Europe, we have the CBAM thingy. I posted a link. It's Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism. It is, yeah, a thing where suppliers basically need to report on their, carbon emission things, but it only covers things like cement and industry steel and those kind of things. And I was wondering if basically, there was some other standard you were following on.
So let me make like one addendum to my statement. So in terms of all my statements are relative to research into environmental ecological standards. But if you look at energy providers, there seems to be more standardization and consensus for actually energy suppliers. And so that's what I aired on using their definitions and their references. So
This was no criticism at all. I just wondered, I mean, because this is a whole big field
I mean,
with lots of,
this is why my mind was blown and I kept doubting myself. But I think these are things that people can agree on. We can add, I mean, I think the concepts are the same. The units may vary. I think that the units that I've picked only vary in terms of magnitude. So tons versus millions of tons. So that's just another magnitude. But it seems like I'd like to encourage normalization of the data for people who produce SBOMs to normalize to tons or fractions of tons. That's kind of where my head was at.
So just to clarify why I was asking this, but thank you. I was aware of this like a CBAM thingy in the industry world, and I was just wondering if there was something in the IT world as well, like some regulation like the Cyber Resilience Act for environmental things and software that I wasn't aware of. But from what I understand, that's not the case, and this is brand new territory. So this is good. That's all I wanted to know. Thanks.
Yeah, cryptography has a long history of being obviously it's very rigid. You're talking about ciphers and algorithms, things like that are when it comes to data security, that rapidly immediately has a footprint of development in standards organizations like NIST and FIPS and things like that. So environmental, not so much. So, unfortunately. Again, I've created definitions for those activities that I selected above. And again, there's one per each of the two yellow ones and all the green ones. In terms of energy provider, these are things that my researchers are if any cloud provider is very cognizant of what data centers they're running their training and things on. So they should be able to provide where their energy comes from. So I don't use the term data center because I think that's too closed-minded. Going back to my discussion earlier of where things are going with distributed training, and even IBM, our emphasis is on putting all our AI on OpenShift to be multi-cloud and cloud neutral. So it's very and a lot of and the stacks we're using, containerized stacks and other stacks we're using to schedule the training of these things are can work across clouds. So you're going to have more than one provider, and some of them could run on a localized cluster. It's not part of a data center, so I avoided the data center terminology and just use energy provider. And then if you want to go down and you can give your own common name for it, description of it, if there's an address. So I know like Azure, like for example, I know very well, I did a lot of research when Azure was building their data center like 15, 20 years ago in San Antonio, that they had to go through, they actually spanned two electrical providers, electrical grids. So if this is run like for example, the training was done on the Azure data center in San Antonio, they would, I would expect them to supply the, the addresses of the energy, if they use one or both of those providers to provide them. And then the types of power, then you'll see here that they actually declare, and this is based upon, again, documentation I linked. These are the recognized energy providers for power plants, both in the US, Europe, etc. So you can declare, so you can see, you can actually be proud and say we use all solar or geothermal or something like that. So I know that people are mindful. I know that, not related to ML, I know that IBM's looking at a lot of our quantum computing stuff, in mountains, and things like that. So geothermal may be a possibility for powering clusters of quantum computers in the future. So I'm sure, there's things in Iceland and otherwhere that do these things as well. And then again, the portion of energy provided from that provider. So if you want to say that this much came from this provider, this much came from another provider, you can do so from this field. But then it should be additive and reflect what's in your summary in the structure above. And then I created two measures, one for CO2 measure, and this goes back to the units. I use EQ because it looks like that's the consensus amongst model providers, including Hugging Face and others. So EQ seems to be the measure. I saw one European agency use dash EQ, but typically, you remove the dash anyways, in short form. And then I created another measure for, again, I'm using kilowatts of energy, kilowatt hours of energy, and using the non-SSI definition for kilowatt hours. And then again, the postal address I created basically, we do not reference, our schemas are all considered core in CycloneDX. So all the data types we produce are native or provided through direct reference. We don't natively do any type of, remote schema linking necessarily, but direct import. So this is basically a schema.org postal address that I've just basically going to codify into Cyclone. And all these data types are going to be part of reusable definitions in the CycloneDX. You'll see that in the pull request. So this address could be used elsewhere if needed. But this is like, if you want to contact and verify this entity exists, here's where you go find them. And I made a note off to the right that we could expand that. There's actually a contact point. And I think there's, if we want to do that, there's going to be some discussion on how that overlaps, maybe more towards the 2.0 timeframe of Cyclone on things like organizational contact and things like that, right? And that's about it, really. So thanks for listening. And are there any questions before I stop sharing? Need to reference some graphic or something?
It's really cool. Thanks, Matt.
Yeah,
Right,
thank you,
you.
Matt.
Are these slides available?
I can make them available. I think my intent was I finished them like 20 minutes before this call. So
The best kind.
Yeah, the best kind. So I will take the parts I've shown today and put them in a separate PDF, and I'll try to attach them to the pull request.
That'd be great. I'm trying to understand like the whole breadth of some of these climate efforts. Are you familiar with what the Green Software Foundation has been doing around some of their standard work?
No, I'm not.
Oh, I'm wondering if there's intersection there. I linked to it in the chat. There's another Linux Foundation project, and I believe that their impact framework is something that they have been working towards getting ISO. No, I take that back. I think it's a SCI is something that they're trying to standardize.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, again, I think that more and more my day job is going to be working with the AI Alliance, which is not an LF entity, but there are a lot of strong discussions happening at high levels between the LF Foundation execs, some of which were my former bosses or colleagues, and making sure that there's a strong relationship between the LF Foundation and AI Alliance, especially since IBM was part of the LF AI Data Formation and other related foundations. So, but I'm not aware of the greenhouse one. So, please send me references. I'm sure I can do a Google search, but any direct references
Yeah.
are needed.
I linked to the Green Software Foundation in
Thank
the
you.
Zoom chat, and then this CSI. Sorry, I keep saying it wrong. SCI guide, which is I
Gotcha.
think a calculation they're trying to standardize.
Oh, cool. It looks like they picked energy consumption as a term and kilowatt hours as their unit. So awesome.
You're on the right track.
But it looks like they have a little bit more of a JSON schema, and even with CycloneDX's schema being self-contained, it would be nice if we could coincide with externally defined things where possible, even for like addresses and such. Right?
Yeah, I will say that both for CBOM and MLBOM, our goal was not to compete or necessarily reference one standard, especially in an evolving space. That we would follow the same. We would want to use the linkage, the external link capability in CycloneDX. Use ours as kind of like the index or abstracted piece of data. And then if you have different competing standards or initiatives, we don't want to be part of we don't want to pick winners or be part of that bake-off contest. That you pick whatever you want to pick. Resolve to normalize to ours. Give us a summary of what's going on. But if you have more discrete information and a different specification, link to it. Provide a link or evidence or a log or a set of records or whatever it might be. That's our continued methodology in Cyclone.
Oh, I
does
see.
your
Thanks for explaining.
PR, does your PR actually have support for external references for energy consumption then, or no?
No, I think it needs to be sprinkled with
Okay.
properties and external things like that. So
Okay. All right. Very good.
yeah, I thought the
All
core
right.
maintainers would, we would get together and do those type of things. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, Jan is on vacation this week. How dare he? So we have not had a chance to review it, but I wanted to give Matt an opportunity to present this today because it is a fairly big topic, and I think it was good to get us kind of all educated on the work that he's doing, because we will have to possibly review it at some point, possibly in the next couple of weeks. We'll see how far Matt can get.
This was a really good presentation. Thanks for taking us through the whole motivation and explanation. So, was I understanding that these annotations about energy intensity are accessible to non-AI parts of the BOM as well, or non-ML parts?
Yeah,
Or is
I
it
mean,
only? Okay.
I focus on model card because that seems to be where the attention is. Like you look at where are the elephants in the room? But obviously, these are all reusable data types I've created. So, they could be, referenced in other places where it makes sense.
Oh,
yeah.
I see. So it'll be easier to extend in that direction over time.
Yeah, I mean, now that you brought it up, I mean, and also having authored a majority of the formulation stuff, anything where any part of a general software build lifecycle, these things could be referenced. So ideally, I plan to do this for 1.6, but when we break down all the tasks and all the steps that you use to produce a piece of software or data for that matter, or build hardware. So this could be building a car. So we could easily use these data types to annotate or link to different tasks of building a car. How much energy do I use? So great thought. But yeah, that's exciting to me. Very cool.
All right. I had the last item on the agenda I had was to review the draft specification. Looks like Alyssa had to drop, however, so I don't necessarily know if we should dive into that right now. I submitted a a questionnaire for everyone's availability over like the next month, month and a half, whatever that was, so that we can start the knowledge transfer of actually going through the entirety of the CycloneDX spec with everyone. It's going to take a while, but I think that work needs to get done. So if you haven't already, go ahead and fill out that your availability on this. Let's see.
Steve, where did you provide that link?
That was in the Ecma TC54
Slack channel.
Slack channel. Yeah, thank you. On March
So
2nd.
can Samina, can you confirm with us what the required timeline for this review is? Because I think Steve and I had different understandings after the previous meeting.
I can. Is this the right moment to do that?
Well, it just feeds into the interest survey. So I was hoping that we could spend the time between now and like mid-June potentially reviewing it, because it's quite a tight timeline to try to finish by April 25th or something. Do we have that flexibility?
So it's difficult. So you know that the vote takes place in June 26th. The General Assembly needs to have a 60-day period of review. So if you work backwards from that, it brings you to about the 24th of April, where you really should be, you have that spec frozen. And
so to be clear, the idea is not to make modifications to the spec, but to validate it within this group.
Okay, so if the spec is frozen today, for example, hypothetically saying, and you want to use the time to review it, and what is frozen today is what you want to present to the ExaCom to take forward to the GA, then you would have time. Would you be concerned that in doing this review, you would have to make some changes?
Possibly. That is a risk, but I imagine in that scenario, we could then at the GA convene a postal ballot for 60 days further out. And so there would be a delay, but not like a 6-month delay.
So you may step back and say you're not ready and then do a postal ballot. You can do postal ballots. We haven't done it in a long time, but yes, it can be done. And the worst case scenario is it's the end of the year, but you may not like to do that. So,
well, but it seems like there's no particular risk of that, given the option of a postal ballot.
Right, there is a postal ballot you can do. So if you have that risk of change and you're not able to submit something that you all as a committee agree on that you want to put forward, then you would have to then request a postal ballot to do it in the next 60 days.
But
that
to
makes
be
sense.
clear, editorial changes, if we find a last minute editorial issue, it's still
Correct.
possible to make those while it's already under GA consideration?
Absolutely. So as you may know from TC39, when a spec is put in and is frozen, you have a buffer to make editorial change, not nominative changes. So that needs to be clearly agreed also upon the committee.
Okay.
Not for
Given
weeks on end. It would be good that you could be done within
Yeah.
some weeks, some short weeks. Yeah, go ahead.
I think the only changes that would be possibly made would in fact be editorial, because the last thing that we would want is for the Ecma version of the spec to be different than the OWASP version from the spec. So we wouldn't be modifying how it works. It would be word choices or editorial.
Absolutely. And it's important that the whole committee agrees to that. So that's all my statement is.
Okay, great. So it sounds like we could safely spread this work out between now and mid-June, which I think would, for me personally, it would be a lot easier for me to sign on to these meetings if it's, I don't know if an hour per week adds up to enough time, or 2 hours per a 3-hour thing. There's a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I agree. It's a big time slot. Okay, so as long as we can make some minor editorial changes without an issue, I think that's good. Let me try to book I'm going to try to book based on the existing calendar, some of the 3-hour sessions. And then what we'll do is outside of those sessions, we'll have shorter 1-hour sessions to cover the bulk of the spec.
So if I may
and-
just, sorry, Steve, I will expect that for the April 25th Exacom, TC54 will promote that the specification will be provided in June for approval, and that it is frozen and that it is under review and only editorial changes are anticipated. We also have to do an opt-out to ensure there are no patent issues. That must be a 60-day period. So you may do that also in parallel.
What's the requirement for the opt-out?
It is to ensure that there are no patent conflicts or nobody wants to pull out. So I would recommend you, if you're ready to do that, that you make that statement, and I'll help you write a short document which then needs to be posted, and that all members know. So if there's any concerns, they may have their lawyers or legals look at the standard as specification as it is now.
Got it.
So
Okay.
just to clarify the purpose of the opt-out, we are a royalty-free technical committee, and that means that standards that we develop, unlike some patent encumbered standards like for wireless protocols, are freely open and available to everybody, including for all intellectual property, including patents for use. The way that it works for patent licensing is everybody who has signed the royalty-free patent agreement agrees that unless you opt out during the opt-out period, your like member entity or closing corporation is licensing anything that's contained in the standard that you may have intellectual property over for royalty-free use. So the opt-out period gives, in principle, time for this internal review to check to make sure that you're okay with granting that license.
Got it.
So yeah, it can take place concurrently to other sorts of reviews, as long as we're not, in the worst case, adding extra intellectual property. That would be the thing that would make the opt-out period definitely have to start over.
Thank you, Daniel.
Have we ever faced similar problems with the CycloneDX specification that someone has claimed any patents or?
No.
No.
There is a relevant intellectual property review that I would like to do with CycloneDX, because not all of the contributors to CycloneDX are members of Ecma. So we should make sure that all past contributors to the schema have licensed their contributions to Ecma for inclusion in the standard. I don't know if we can do outreach based on like the GitHub commit log, but that's a non-trivial task in itself.
Yeah, I can get you that information, at least for the Git. What I can't necessarily provide is I don't think all the names of people who have contributed to all the calls that we've had, because the audit trail is just not there.
Well, let's work on the PR authors, the commit authors, and yeah.
There's only a handful, so that part's easy.
Okay, great.
But we could make a blog entry on OWASP or something, a call out, and just to make sure we have a trail that we try to reach out to people.
I don't think that counts for anything in particular.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not giving anybody legal advice, but I
I mean, I actually had the same thought, because it's just due diligence. I mean, so
we've been having similar issues with some licenses in open source projects where it's practically impossible to track all the way down beyond Git into SVN and SCVS and so. So we just make best effort, try to reach everyone, make everyone aware of what's going on, and then.
So Ole, if I may ask, it would be to put a call of information out, and if there is some concerns, it could be that somebody would react to it.
I guess it's more like a call for everyone who's contributed to CycloneDX in any way that they feel is significant to sign some web form to license their contributions to Ecma. So it's a thing that couldn't hurt, even if we collect extra signatures, rather than only contact. Is that what you're suggesting, Ole?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably 60% marketing that we're going into a formal Ecma process, and we want to get control over all the patent claims and everything. But 40% is having a proof that we actually did it. If someone comes up a year from now saying, "Oh, I wasn't aware of this," then we at least we had blog entries and we had information out that this was happening.
Well, if I think
Yeah,
it would be a
that's
very
great.
good exercise, would you take on that?
I'm looking at Steve, but he doesn't see where I'm looking. I think we can write something up together.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Does
That's-
CycloneDX
that's
or
great.
OWASP not have like a CLA or something when you have a pull request already doing this?
We have a CLA, Apache 2 license since inception, yes.
The
And all the
CLA is
And all the
different.
commits are DCO signed. They're signed. So
Yes.
I wouldn't expect an issue then.
The CLA is a little bit different from the royalty-free patent agreement because that implies that the other contributions
well, no,
made to
but
the
you have to
standard.
remember, we have to remember contributions both, are it's not just the CLA. It's also covered by the explicit license of the code. So that we're talking about here, the schema is the canonical representation of the standard. And that's code that gets signed by the ICLA, but the contributions, it also carries the weight of the license that is posted on the actual repository, the actual source code
Yeah,
repository.
that's great. It sounds like you've been doing good due diligence. The royalty-free technical committee agreement covers a bit more because if you claim intellectual property over somebody else's contributions, which is something that often occurs in these weird wireless standards or compression, whatever, then you say, oh, even though you contributed this, I have a patent to it. This specifically guards against that. I don't think that's likely to occur in this world, but still part of our structure. So
I
it
guess what I was
wouldn't.
pointing out is that sorry, I got a phone call at the same time, is that the Apache 2 license, for example, is 100% royalty free, 100%.
Yeah.
And it's so that's what all contributions are submitted under the Apache 2 royalty free clauses.
That's
Anyway.
great, but you're pledging the patent to your contribution. You're not pledging the patent to other people's contributions in the same repo.
But I'm
Whereas-
saying every person does that it's implicit in every project in GitHub or any source control management system that is when you submit under the published, at the time you submit, the published code or informational license or data license for that matter.
Yeah,
I think there are some differences, but I think doing the blog as was suggested will cover many bases.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And I plus one that.
Thank you very much. And I think there's always a little bit of risk, but we try to minimize that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think the risk here is low, but I think we're asking people to sign an additional thing that they didn't sign.
I'm just getting up in arms because
yeah.
I am part of the open source clearance council for all of IBM. And so I'm highly aware, and I teach licenses and things and work with lawyers constantly. So anyway.
Well, good. I'm glad we have your help. I'm on the similar thing for Bloomberg, but we're a much smaller company. Anyway, for these sessions where we're going to be going over the whole standard in detail, I would like to do a little bit more outreach to get membership. I think these sessions will be especially interesting and attractive to people because it's a learning opportunity, both for enabling people to attend, as well as for publicizing the videos afterwards. These will
Does
probably
any
be more.
person, I have no problem with doing, before I pronounce you man and wife, do you have anyone have any objections in doing a broadcast and say, and doing the diligent, I have no problem with that at all. I think that's the right approach. Absolutely. Cover all your bases. Yeah.
Sorry. I was talking about a different thing. I was talking about outreach for the subsequent meetings that we're trying to schedule where we talk about it. No, I'm agreeing with Ole's idea. No concerns. Just saying.
Going back to that, sorry, we mentioned the contributing license agreement. Do we need to review that and add something? Because I mean, we're going to stay in Ecma, so we may as well have a contributor license agreement that fits with the Ecma process.
Yeah, here's the thing, Daniel. If we have a community model where this is going to continuously be an issue, and we can't for every release do this same thing. So what might want to consider is replacing the CLA with ECMA specific verbiage to actually cover this particular case.
Exactly.
I'm not sure if that's the kind of thing many companies would be comfortable signing on to, because you're licensing things that might not have even been contributed yet. You're licensing for other people's contributions that may be about your, referencing your intellectual property.
This working group, this TC, then is going to do this for every single release of Cyclone, because that's what would be required.
No, well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we have to think about this.
It's a never-ending loop.
That's not scalable.
So Steve, if I made your suggestion, I'd like to think about that, and I'm just looking at the time for this meeting, this conversation about how we want to make sure that we are well covered on the royalty-free side. We may need to have an agenda item on our next meeting and make sure we're aligned with that. Perhaps looking at that text and seeing how on the CLA and seeing how an ECMA text would fit in may be something we can bring into the next meeting.
The royalty-free policy is also an optional policy for Ecma TCs. And we can always consider adopting different policies that are suitable to the needs of the TCs. But we do have to stick to one or other intellectual property policy for Ecma in creating any standard. Anyway, thank you.
Good meeting, everyone. Thank you so much for attending. Cheers.
Thank you.
Cheers.